The card table has 3 legs that lock and 1 that doesn't. Somebody always has to hold it steady while the food goes down. It has been in your family for 31 years. And by the time this story is over, that wobbly leg will be the only thing left that everyone in your family agrees actually belongs to all of them. Here's the number nobody at that table could have told you. 2 brothers. Same Thanksgiving. Same house. One checking account sitting at $312. The other sitting at $41,000. And not one person in that kitchen could have guessed which number belonged to which brother. You're Sam. You are 24, standing by the card table holding a paper plate you don't need yet, and your brother Marcus is telling the room about the truck. Fully loaded, he says. 0 down, he says. Like 0 is a kind of victory. Marcus is 26, works in equipment sales, and has never once in his life let a room forget he was in it. Your father claps him on the back. Your Aunt Denise asks to see photos on his phone. You say nothing, because there is nothing to say. 11 days ago you made a decision nobody in this kitchen knows about, and you intend to keep it that way. 11 days before this Thanksgiving, you opened a Roth IRA with $47. Not a typo. 47, because that's what was left after rent. And you'd read somewhere that the account mattered more than the amount. That starting was the whole trick. That the first deposit was really just a signature disguised as money. You set up an automatic transfer of $47 a week, not a month, a week. Time to hit 2 days after your paycheck landed, before you could see the number and talk yourself out of it. Marcus's truck payment is $612 a month for 72 months. Nobody at the table does that math out loud, so nobody hears it. $44,064 on a truck that will be worth about $19,000 by the time he makes the last payment. You run the number in your head while Denise admires the leather seats. You don't say it out loud. Saying it out loud has never once made a Thanksgiving better. Here's the part your family won't understand for a long time. Quiet is not the same as poor. It just looks that way from across a dinner table. 4 years later, you are 28. The card table comes out again, same house, and the wobbly leg is now officially Marcus's leg. Because at some point he fixed it wrong with a folded piece of cardboard, and nobody has bothered to fix it properly since. Your $47 a week has become $210, 2 raises, and you didn't adjust your spending, you adjusted the transfer. The account that started at $47 now holds $31,400. You have never told anyone this number, not your father, not Denise. Not even, yet, the person you're dating. Marcus has a new truck. The old one, the fully loaded one, got traded in at a loss of $6,200 because trucks depreciate faster than people expect and dealerships know exactly how much faster. He doesn't mention the $6,200. He mentions the new sound system. This is the year you start meeting with an accountant named Sarah Reyes, who works out of a strip mall office above a nail salon and charges $140 an hour, and is, without question, the best $140 an hour you have ever spent. You sit across a folding table from her with a legal pad between you, and she says the sentence that rearranges how you see the last 4 years. You didn't get lucky, Sam. You just stopped negotiating with your future self every single week. Then she turns her laptop toward you and shows you the actual line. $210 a week, invested at a conservative 7%, compounding for 30 more years. She taps the number at the bottom of the screen. $1.1 million, give or take, by the time you're 58. Not from a windfall. Not from a stock tip, from never once having the conversation about whether this week could be the exception. You stare at the number longer than you mean to. She doesn't rush you. Debt is loud on purpose. It wants to be seen. Wealth doesn't need witnesses, so most of the time, it doesn't have any. Your Uncle Roger is the one who built the card table, back before any of you were born, in a garage that doesn't exist anymore. He's 71 now, still sits at the head of it every year, still asks Marcus about work, about the truck, about how business is treating him. He asks you, sometimes, if you're happy. He never asks what you make, what you save, what your accounts hold. Because in your family that has always been the one rude question nobody's allowed to bring up over turkey. And here's the quiet irony sitting under every single one of these dinners. Everyone at that table has a rough guess about Marcus's finances, because Marcus has told them, in pieces, over years, without ever meaning to. Nobody has the faintest guess about yours, because you have never told anyone anything, not out of shame, out of habit. The habit turned into a kind of privacy, and the privacy turned into something closer to a secret, and somewhere in there, without you quite choosing it, you became the wealthiest person at a table that has no idea. You are 33 now. Marcus's business, a small equipment leasing operation he started with 2 partners, is short $18,000 for a supplier payment, and the bank has already said no twice. He calls you on a Tuesday, not a holiday, which is how you know it's serious, because Marcus only calls on holidays otherwise. You can hear it in his voice before he says a word, that flatness he gets when the room isn't clapping him on the back. He doesn't ask for the money directly, he talks around it for 11 minutes. About the partners, about a client who's late paying, about how it's temporary, just a timing thing. You already know your answer before he finishes the sentence. And that, more than the number itself, is the moment you understand exactly how far the two of you have drifted from the same starting line. You lend him $18,000, interest-free, with a simple 2-page agreement Sarah drafts for $210. He pays back $4,000 that first year. Then the payments slow, then they stop. There's no fight about it, no confrontation, just a slow, quiet tapering. A text that says, sending more next week, that arrives less and less often, until one day, you notice you've stopped expecting a reply at all. Somewhere in there, without ever saying it out loud, you reclassify the remaining $14,000 in your own head. Not a loan anymore, just the price of not having this conversation at Thanksgiving for the rest of your lives. Being generous in private costs more than being generous in public. In public, generosity gets you a toast. In private, it just gets you quiet. You are 37, and your wife Claire asks you, on an ordinary Sunday, why you've never told your family how well you're actually doing. She's not upset about the money. She manages half of it herself and has for years. She's asking because she watched your father, at the last dinner, quietly slip Marcus $200 for gas money on his way out the door. The same father who has no idea his other son could, without blinking, cover 4 generations of gas money and never once notice the withdrawal. You don't have a clean answer for her. The honest one is uncomfortable. Telling them would change how they see you, and some small, unexamined part of you has enjoyed being underestimated. It's safer there. Nobody asks you for anything when they think you have nothing extra. Nobody resents you. Nobody watches how you spend $1 wondering if you could have spent it on them instead. But safety and closeness turned out to be different rooms, and you'd been quietly choosing the first one for 13 years without ever noticing you were also declining the second. 2 years before this conversation with Claire, your father's roof needed $6,000 in repairs he didn't have. You transferred the money through Sarah's firm, routed so it landed in his account looking like an insurance payout instead of a gift from his son. He never asked questions. He still tells people money is tight. You let him. Letting him is the cost. It doesn't show up on any statement, and it is the only number in this entire story that actually keeps you up at night. Uncle Roger dies in March, quietly, in his sleep, the way he always said he wanted to. At the house afterward, the family pulls the card table out one more time. Not for a holiday this time, just because nobody can think of anywhere else to put the coffee and the sandwiches, and old habits don't ask permission. Marcus fixes the wobbly leg again, badly, with the same fold of cardboard. Nobody laughs about it this time. Roger's will is short. The house goes to your father. A modest annuity gets split 3 ways, and then there's one line near the bottom that nobody expected. Roger had, without telling a single person, been putting $50 a month into a small trust for 11 years, meant to go to, in his words, whichever of my nieces or nephews needs it least, because that's the one who'll know what to do with it. Everyone in the room assumes it's a joke, a classic Roger line, until Sarah, who it turns out Roger had quietly hired to manage the trust 4 years earlier, after one conversation with you at a family barbecue he never mentioned to anyone, confirms out loud that it names you. It isn't a large sum. $9,700. It was never about the money. It's that Roger saw it. The whole time, at the head of a table he built with his own 2 hands, asking Marcus about trucks and asking you if you were happy, he saw exactly which one of you had quietly become the wealthiest person in the family. And he never once said it out loud either. Quiet people recognize each other. That's usually the only advertising quiet money ever does. You are 41 now. Your net worth, on paper, in a spreadsheet only you and Claire and Sarah have ever seen, sits at $1,380,000. A Roth account that started at $47. A modest rental property bought with cash from a sale nobody in your family ever knew you made. A college fund for your own kids that's already fully on track before they've finished elementary school. Marcus, by contrast, is starting over at 43. Renting an apartment 11 minutes from the house you both grew up in. Driving a truck that's 9 years old now and, for the first time in his adult life, actually paid off. And somehow, by every measure that isn't a spreadsheet, he seems lighter than you've seen him in a decade. He laughs more at these dinners now. He asks more questions, instead of filling every silence with an answer. You take the card table home with you after the funeral, the way somebody has to, and you finally replace the wobbly leg. The real fix this time, no cardboard. A proper hardware store hinge that costs $6.40 and takes 11 minutes to install. It has stood level in your dining room for 2 years now, and every single time you set it up for your own kids' birthdays, some small, unreasonable part of you misses the wobble, misses having one thing in this family that everyone still had to hold on to together. You never did tell them the number. Maybe you will someday, or maybe, somewhere along the way, you finally understood that the number was never really the thing you were protecting. So here's the question the table never answers, because tables don't answer anything, they just hold whatever gets put on them. If the people who love you most have no idea how far you've come, is that privacy, or is it just a different kind of distance, one you built so carefully and so quietly that even you stopped noticing you were the one holding the door shut?